Good evening, viewers. I am your host, Mohammed Nazir, program with Guest in Town. As we have discussed in our last program, every week we will bring for you legal information, and the format of this program is very flexible. We will discuss different legal questions, but these questions does not amount legal advice. It's a general discussion, and as usual, today we have our guest in town, our special guest, Mr. Kiley. He's a solicitor, and his background is previously he has qualified as a barrister, and then subsequently he practiced in Malaysia, and in 2002 he qualified as a solicitor of England and Wales, and now he's practicing with Sheffield-based firm Wosskow. Welcome to my show, Kiley.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure. I know you have a vast experience of the different areas of law, and recently you have dealt with a lot of acquisitions. But before we start and kick off this show, could you please introduce yourself and your experience in the legal profession?
Well, I started out initially as a commercial litigation solicitor in Malaysia, and I dealt with very large and very complicated cases for a variety of clients, from multinationals to even the small business. In the midst of doing all that, I also had the opportunity to deal with some very interesting cases as well, one of which was involved an exchange of babies at birth, where I was defending a hospital. And it was a highly sensitive case at the time, and the experience has really helped me in my work today, because the issue of disputes at the end of the day is one of the core things that solicitors do on a day-to-day basis, which is to deal with resolving a dispute for a particular client. And without knowing how to resolve a dispute, it is often very difficult to advise a client in relation to what we call the non-contentious matters, which is transactional work and mergers and acquisitions. Since returning to this country in 2002, I've been dealing with a variety of contentious and non-contentious matters, disputes, and also drafting of contracts. And in the last 4 years, my focus has now been in relation to non-contentious work, drafting contracts, and acquiring and buying businesses. In my time here, I've acted for a cleaning company in a 6-figure claim against an insurance company for a cleaning job that they carried out as a result of the 2007 flooding in Sheffield, and which was very interesting because obviously a huge swathe of Sheffield was involved, and I was acting for a very small company who had to take on a very, very large company and fighting for their rights. And only recently, in the past 4 weeks or so, I recently completed on a fairly large acquisition in the sale of a business where it was worth £2.4 million. So the work that I've done is very varied, and not a day goes by when I walk into the office where I find something new that really piques my interest.
Thank you very much. For the interest of our viewers, I will mention, it's worth mentioning here, because for our lot of viewers will be interested to know that how you see the two different legal systems, one in Malaysia, one in England. So how you comparison, how you do the comparative studies of both?
I think it's very interesting, having worked in Malaysia and worked in England. The reality is that the system is nearly the same. Nearly, I would say there's a bit of an overlap of around 70%. But the real distinction here, I suppose, is that in England, the status of a solicitor is elevated in that the courts, the judge, will trust what you say rather than distrusting what you say. So the court will accept what you say, and it's very and it really brings home the importance of you as a solicitor, that you are in fact an officer of the court, that you are in fact an officer of justice, and that whatever you do, you have a professional duty to the court and also to the client. And I think that's very important to remember. And a lot of solicitors, a lot of young solicitors nowadays, I'm having to train them to think that way, that they are actually, it's a very serious profession. And it's not something to be entered into lightly.
Thank you. Now we move forward. Looking at the recent property market and commercial transactional work, so I've seen your CV that recently you're doing a lot of transactional work and acquisitions. So what other areas of law you cover in your recent I say role?
Well, as I said, I mean, I do a lot of different things, one of which is acquisitions, and the other bit is also drafting up contracts for clients. And they could be fairly straightforward contracts like terms of business, terms and conditions, but they also could be very complicated contracts like distribution agreements and agency agreements, and some of them are international distribution agreements, either outward from the UK out to, let's say, countries like Brazil, or inward, where companies in Canada are bringing in investments and wanting to appoint agencies here. So it's very, very, very varied. I can also say that, and I'm also very pleased to say really, that there has been a growth in that area. And that is one of the evidence to suggest to me that the economy is improving, business is improving, there's a lot more confidence in the market, in business communities, because they're more willing now to take on risks that they would not have been willing to take on maybe even 12 months ago.
Thank you. Viewers, you are watching Guest in Town with Mohammed Nazir, and if you have any questions or if you have any legal proposition, you can email me, and my email address is shown on the screen, and you can email me and I will try my best to bring that information in my coming shows. You are watching Guest in Town with Mohammed Nazir, and we have a special guest in studio, Mr. Kileys. He's a partner in a Sheffield-based law firm. Kileys, now we move forward for further question about partnership. Is a quite interesting subject for the lawyers. So mostly have seen that sometimes people, when they start businesses, especially new businesses, they don't have documentation right. They don't keep the partnership in writing. Everything they do verbally. So what are the dangers of not having partnership agreement in place?
Well, one of the biggest dangers is that when parties fall out, or even when one party passes away, it becomes very, very difficult. It's strange that the Partnership Act that we have in this country dates back to the 1800s, actually. And it's strange because even in 2014, we're relying upon a law that is so old. Now, obviously, this law has been amended throughout the years, but it just gives you an idea of how old the idea of partnership is in this country. What often surprises a lot of people is that if they don't have, when I explain to them that if they don't have a written agreement, then the backup position, the fallback position is the Act, the Partnership Act. And the difficulty with that is that if one party passes away, the partnership essentially ends. And what that means in law is that every asset that you have as a partnership will have to be sold, all the proceeds then gathered, and then paid off to the two partners. So obviously if one is passed away, then it will be to his estate. The other thing as well is in relation to disputes, if you don't have something in writing, it is often very difficult for lawyers then to try and resolve that dispute, because we're having to guess and we're having to give advice on the what if question. You know, what if the court finds that they prefer your version of events as opposed to the opponent? And it becomes very difficult to advise the client, and how then we would foresee a court would decide on a particular case. So my advice to all and anyone who's watching this is always get your documentation right, because if you don't, you end up spending more money fighting it.
And how long it takes if, suppose, two partners wants to complete their partnership agreement, how long it takes to complete a partnership agreement?
Well, it could be very, very quick, but oftentimes it would take somewhere in the region of maybe 2 to 4 weeks. The reality is that we do a draft agreement and we present it to the client, And the client will then have to decide whether or not that is what they want. And if it's not what they want, then we work with that client to make it so that it is exactly as what they want. And that takes time.
Thank you. For businesses, what do you think? Because as a businessman, if somebody wants to start up a new business, so they can have a sole tradesmanship, or they can have a company, they can have partnership. So what is the ideal for the new businesses?
It depends on a lot of circumstances, Mohammed. The most basic business structure, if you like, is a sole trader. So you know, Mr. So-and-so, you set up a business called so-and-so. And you could be a plumber, you could be an electrician, you could do a lot of things with that. But what happens is that you are your own boss. You decide whether you do work or not. And if you do work on that day, you'll get paid. If you don't get paid. And the beauty about this is obviously the buck stops with you. You make all the final decisions. It's good to some extent. The other way is obviously a partnership where two or more people work together to form a business, to work together to achieve a particular aim. So for example, me and you could come together and set up a law firm, for example, and we could be partners doing that. And then after that, if you take it a step further, you could set up a company. The difference between a company and a limited company, a company and a partnership, is essentially the liability. So if I'm a sole trader or a partner, and what happens is if I then go out and do business, and let's say I do a very bad job, the person who I've done a very bad job for will come to me and ask me to give them the compensation. And it's only right, if I do a bad job, that I should be asked to compensate. In a company, the law says you create another person. It's almost like another person sitting right next to me, another legal person. And that person is the person who then carries out that job for you. So if anything goes wrong, it's actually the legal person who will be liable for it, and not you as the shareholder.
So we may say that it is a transfer of liability from one individual to a legal entity?
That's right, absolutely right. And this is the legal fiction that the law creates. Now it raises very interesting questions, you know. So if I set up a limited company, that's it. I'm off the hook because I've got this legal person who will take all the liabilities. But it's not that simple, because from many years of experience, many people have learned how to deal with that. And the law as well stops you from taking advantage of this legal person in order to do nasty and bad stuff. So if you do naughty things whilst you're as a company, as a director and as a shareholder, you could be called to account.
Thank you, very detailed answer. Now we will proceed towards the premises, because very important part of the business is premises. If you are a small shop or you're a big business, obviously you need place to start the business with. So when we talk about the premises, then of course we need to talk about the ownership of the property or the lease. So how you will recommend, or how you will see for a new business, what is the importance of the lease and how it works?
Leases are very important, because any business that grows to a particular size, and even some very small businesses, will need premises. They will need to trade from a property. And leases are obviously something which people are in a rush to get into, because you want to start your business quickly, you want to start earning money, you want to have your premises all done up so it's nice and pretty, so that you can bring customers in. The difficulty with leases is that very often some of the leases are not done properly, they're not prepared properly, and as a result of that, it leads to various complications. So what we say to clients who think about taking leases is that always take independent legal advice. Always take advice on your lease, because you could find yourself getting into a lot of trouble. For instance, I've heard of a case where a particular tenant took a 25-year lease without a break clause. What that means is that this tenant will have that property for 25 years. And if his business fails, and for whatever reason, he cannot use that property, in the next 25 years, he's still stuck with it. And that is something that is difficult to comprehend, but it is, nonetheless, you need to understand that that's what you're getting yourself into.
I have always some rapid fire questions for my guest in town.
Okay.
So they will not be difficult, but of course there will be interesting question from you. So first of all, the rapid fire question. Are you ready?
Yes.
Your favorite song?
I Should Be So Lucky by
Very
Kylie
nice.
Minogue.
Favorite color?
Blue.
And favorite player?
Favorite player? Football player? I think it has to be Ian Rush. If you know who Ian Rush is from Liverpool, then you know how old you are.
Thank you. And favorite city?
It's got to be my hometown, Penang, but Sheffield is a very, very close second.
So you're diplomatic here.
No, well, you know what? I have been in Sheffield for the last 14 years, and I love it to bits, and it's given me everything that I have today. So, I won't knock Sheffield. Sheffield is some which is a place very, very close to my heart.
Before we go for the end of the program, what is your message for our viewers, and anything you want to say to our viewers?
Sheffield is an amazing place to do business. It is, the people are so friendly. The support that you get from professional services is there. We often talk ourselves down. Sheffielders talk ourselves down, but don't, because Sheffield is unique, it's special. And from the outside, I was an outsider looking in, and we have so much going for us. And it's time to stop thinking about Sheffield being backward. We're actually out there, and we need to be more positive about Sheffield. So that's my message to those of you who are watching. If you're watching this and you're thinking, what's going on? Sheffield is a great place to be in, and it's one of the best cities to live in.
And anything our viewers which they can do to eliminate the poverty and to spread the education in the world, what is your advice to them, or what is your message to them?
I've got 2 young kids who are in school, and I share the concerns of parents, across the city, across the region in relation to education and whatnot. And I think what is true is that education doesn't stop at school. Just because children go to school from a particular time during the day, and when they come home, it doesn't stop there. Every day is a school day for children, and you need to get them into the way of doing that, because that's exactly how I am. Every day is a school day, even now for me. Every day when I go to work, I go to the office, I look at something, I'm learning something new. And if you get children to start thinking like that, I think we're on a path that is going to help the whole city, the whole region, reap the benefits of that.
Thank you very much. Viewers, this was a wonderful show with our guest in studio, guest in town with Mohammed Nazir. If you are a solicitor or a barrister, or you are practicing as a chartered surveyor or accountant, please do email me with your CV, and we will try to invite you in our show, Guest in Town, on Sheffield Live Television. And thank you very much for watching this show. And I'm sure in coming days we'll bring more guests, more information, more discussion for you. And this is your own show. Please join us. And if you have any questions, you can email me on my email, which will be shown at this screen. And at the end of the show, it will be also repeated again for you. And thank you very much joining me in this show. And hopefully in coming days, we'll bring more information, more chats in Guest in Town, only on Sheffield Live TV. Thank you.